Hey everyone, welcome to the United States Center for Coaching Excellence Virtual Summit 2020, the future of coaching education and coach development. Just to let everybody know, the main room sessions are being recorded. If we break out into breakout groups, those will not be recorded. We ask that everyone use the renaming feature to put your name and organization in, and I will do that in a moment. Forgot to do that. You can do that by clicking on the three little dots up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and then you can select rename. I will be monitoring the chat during each session, and I'm Sam Callan. I'm from USA Ultimate and have been involved with USCCE for a while now. Now that you're in here, your audio is on mute. Please turn your video on if you would like to share that with us. And when we go into breakout rooms, if we do, then you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself accordingly. So today's sessions will start at 11 o'clock now, and then also at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time and at 2 o'clock Eastern time. We'll take small breaks in between our sessions. So with that, I'm pleased to be able to moderate this session on exploring the intersection between American development model or long-term athlete development and coaching education. And I'm joined by Rick Howard from Chester University and also heavily involved in the NSCA, Ted Logan from the PGA, TJ Buchanan from World Lacrosse, who used to be with US Lacrosse, Mike Kreuger from USA Football, and then Joe Eisenmann, who's with Leeds, Beckett University, and also Volt Athletics. And the goal of this session really is to explore strategies and approaches for aligning long-term athlete development models and coaching education programs. And if we have time, again, depending on how the discussion goes at the end, we will go into breakout sessions and discuss these. But we're going to start with giving the panelists here a few minutes each to give us their thoughts, and then we'll do general question and answer, and we'll see how the flow goes from there. So with that, Rick, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Sam, and welcome everybody for being on this meeting session today. I'm excited to actually be among these panelists. Some great panelists are here, being able to share this information with you. I have a couple slides just to share with you. I wanted to do a quick LTAD ADM overview as it relates to coaching education. And I know Sam did mention that I'm at Chester University and I do a lot of work with the National Strength and Conditioning Association. We actually have an LTAD special interest group, which is relevant to our conversation today. The first thing that I wanted to share with everyone is that we really have some unifying constructs across the board that I think it's important for all of us, no matter which field we're from or which NGB we're with, or how we approach our coaching education, with which population we teach. So if we look at it, some of these constructs that we need to look at, first of all, most of us are familiar with physical literacy. I didn't put up any of the actual pictures of those because there's so many different ways of looking at physical literacy, either as a construct or as an intervention or as a program. So there's that to consider. Also, I think in light of the current events and social situations, social justice is always a big part of what we do, but is often not really talked about or discussed much. But we'll see it throughout the LTAD and ADM model, and I think it's important for us to consider all of these as we go forward. How are we actually having collective impact as organizations? We had a nice conversation yesterday, and we were talking about it's not just what each of us does, it's what all of us do. So how do we actually put together these models, and what are the consistencies that as coach educators, you can understand how to implement them with your particular audience? And then I always like to go back to the 8 dimensions of wellness, because we often focus on the physical, the technical, tactical aspect of it, sometimes within the social, emotional part of it, which is getting a lot more play too. But there are all the other factors that I really think we need to consider. So what is the emotional health of our athletes? How do we put this together in a coaching education program, looking at all the aspects of our athletes' lives when we put together how we're going to best make them the best they can be. The umbrella over long-term athletic development and ADM, this is because LTAD can actually be that framework, that philosophy, that construct, that action plan, whatever we want to consider it, to make all of these actually happen. And as coach educators, it's great to be able to recognize how all of that works. So just wanted to do a quick comparison between NSCA's LTAD and the USOPC's ADM models, because we're speaking the same language. So sometimes we get caught up in the terminology. What are we calling different things? So you see with the NSCA LTLD paper we did, we had 10 pillars of successful long-term athletic development from some of the ADM materials, and we have ADM experts who are going to be talking next. I just wanted to show a couple quick parallels before we get started. There's a lot of the same concepts that ring true, because what we found is that through our programs, there are a lot of similarities with what we actually do in terms of how we're influencing our athletes. So as many activities as possible, for example, is listed in ADM, and the NSA position statement specifically mentions sports sampling across all ages. So there are a lot of different ways that we're all actually very similar. So then just as a really quick overview, and I know the next presenters are going to go through this in more detail, but if you look at the 5 stages to a better sport experience, and we mentioned this in the ADM model, it has healthy sport experience on the physical, mental, and emotional level and potential for growth. One of the 10 pillars within the NSCA is successful athletic development by actually having individualized training programs. How do you actually periodize it? What are the physical literacy pieces that are in there? What's developmentally appropriate, athlete-focused philosophy, quality feedback, effort and development, maximum athletic potential, and the ability to obtain certification. So it all relates back to where we're going, and we're all talking the same thing. So whether we call it LTAD, ADM, we know that we're all specifically trying to do what's best for our athletes. And as coach educators, we're trying to let our coaches know what that looks like. What does that framework look like, so that we're all working together and on the same page. So I just kind of wanted to open it up a little bit, because we keep finding that not everybody is familiar with what LTAD is, or ADM for that matter. So we want to make sure that everybody is consistent, recognizing that we're all speaking the same language. And now our experts will actually tell us what that looks like, Sam.
You nailed it, my man. So we're going to go to Ted Logan from PGA Golf next.
Thank you, Sam. And Rick, it's funny you mentioned that. So slight background on myself: Ted Logan with the PGA of America, or really a conglomerate of that we call USA Golf. So golf has sort of a number of governing bodies. Little bit of background, or apologies, I'm told I have an accent. Initially from Canada, and about 5 years ago decided to move down. I worked for Golf Canada, decided to move down to Jupiter, Florida, where it's slightly warmer in the winter, no offense to Toronto, and worked for the PGA of America. And I'd worked many years for Golf Canada implementing long-term athlete development. And when I moved here, I went to a sport conference, I think it was 2015, and somebody from the USCCE was there talking about this American development model. And I thought, this all sounds strangely familiar. So I left this conference and kind of Googled what the heck it was. And then in little sort of asterisks at the bottom, it was based on long-term athlete development. So great point, Rick. And I think, thank you, Sam and Kristen. And sort of the direction today was, hey, how has golf infused ADM into your coach education? And I think golf coach education, I mean, everybody says, hey, we're different. Golf coach education is slightly different, because really most of our professionals, it's their livelihood, versus, say, I coach youth hockey and youth softball, but I also have a day job. Whereas most of our coaches in golf are professionals. So we have a very broad education system for a PGA professional, and it not only includes sort of the technical, tactical that Rick mentioned, grip, stance, swing, if you will, in golf, but we also have quite an extensive side on the business side. So if you're a coach and you're, you may need you're an independent contractor and I'm a coach, but I'm going to need to run my own business and market it. Or you may work at a golf club where you're going to become the general manager and you got to run the books. And then there's also the operations side of, hey, I work at a golf club and I need to run a 150-person tournament. I need to manage the cart fleet. I need to manage all the merchandise. So there's a lot of education packed in for our golf coaches. It's not just that technical side, but we've deemed, and you can choose as a golf coach, hey, I want to follow a coaching pathway. I want to follow sort of a general management pathway, or I want to follow kind of the traditional golf operations side of things. And run the pro shop and tee times. But we sort of in 2016 said, hey, ADM is so critical and we deem it that important that no matter what stream you're in, it's mandatory. You have to take this. So we developed an ADM guide that Learning in Canada was, hey, we developed this 70-page kind of sciencey guide, and a bunch of early adopters read it and people who were all in, but it wasn't really broadly accepted. So here we said, how do we get this out? So we took that guide and took it to an online learning company there called Lightspeed Virtual Technology, based in Vegas, had nothing to do with sport. They do all of Tony Robbins's learning videos, Damon John from Shark Tank, they do all his videos. They do a bunch of Fortune 500 company training videos. They've essentially taken the online learning model and said, let's stop doing cheesy graphics, talking heads, cheesy music, and turn it into a production that people want to watch. So that's how we kind of took our ADM guidelines and put it into something consumable. And then we also said, okay, once you've done this training, great, but how do we make sure if a golf pro takes it, they're amped up, love the concepts, but are they just going to get back on to the driving range and have a 9-year-old hit 5 irons for an hour, and the 9-year-old will get in the car with mom and dad and say, hey, that wasn't a whole lot of fun. So we said we want to have the training, but we also want an implementation side of things. So we worked with a group called New Start Mobile, and I know Lacrosse has worked with them, hockey, boxing, sailing, a bunch of different sports, but basically said, here's your training, but here's also your implementation model. So it's an app that has all these different activities where they can kind of package it up and then deliver an ADM type experience. So we sort of thought that was, we got to make the model and the training consumable, then we have to make it executable. And then the third part was then we need, which we're in now, is create awareness. So we feel we've got thousands of ADM trained coaches who have all the sort of right activity plans and they're ready to go. But now how do we get people to them? And that's what we're in right now with, we have a PGA.com website that gets 1 million visitors a month, but most of that is people sort of, hey, where's Tiger? How's Phil doing? Kind of checking the leaderboard, but we've never really promoted coaching on that. So now that we feel we've got all these unbelievably trained coaches, our third phase is awareness. And now if you are checking, well, actually it'll launch in August, but if you're checking Tiger's score and you're in Wisconsin, then you'll get a pop-up saying, hey, within 5 miles, did you know that Coach XYZ is running this, Coach XYZ is running that? Really trying to sort of promote those who've taken the training. So I think that's sort of a quick summary, Sam, of we wanted to create awareness, then we wanted to create training, and then really create support for those that are trained. And we're tight on time, but I'll just share in the chat a quick video we did for all of our coaches to try and help them get into that ADM mindset, and it might be useful for some of you.
Cool, thank you, Ted. And I think maybe if we have time, we'll come back and revisit that link and just share it with everyone. But we want to go with TJ Buchanan here, who has been tasked at World Lacrosse with growing the sport, but was instrumental in the development of the ADM at US Lacrosse. So TJ, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. First, again, thank you to Kristen as well for inviting me to present today and be a part of this wonderful session that I think is super valuable to the future of coaching education in the United States. So as a brief introduction, Sam told you I'm now with World Lacrosse, which is the international federation. And really that presents several unique challenges when we talk about coaching education and athlete education, or athlete development and coach development, as the case might be. So a little bit of historical background. As an international federation, we've been around for 40 plus years. And in that 40 plus years, the IF has never had any formalized coach development, athlete development, and very limited officials development. So I really came in with a blank slate to get this thing started. And in thinking about, okay, how are we going to do this? We knew we needed to educate coaches to grow the game, right? We need to develop coaches. Great coaching makes all the difference in the world. We also know that we need to do things that are, age and stage appropriate, as we've, been talking about with the ADM. So actually what we had done was really reverse engineered. We built the athlete development model first. And then once we knew what was the right thing to do for the athletes at the right time in their stage of development, then we started looking at, okay, how are we going to build a coach development model that fits this? From my time with US Lacrosse and having met many of the people on this call through various events at the USOPC, right, in the United States, we're kind of backwards, right? We have all the coach development programs and we're trying to retrofit it. I had this unique situation with a completely blank slate. So what I was wanting to do is share a little bit of, where we're at with it, and then just hit on some of the challenges. All right. So like anything, with a model, right, we have, the graphic model with some core values of it. Don't necessarily call them core values, just more of maybe best principles or best practices in athlete development. So we have our mission and we have our vision, right? And the concepts are really focused on growth of the sport, as well as, development of the athletes. So the idea of play and stay, we want to get as many people involved for as long as possible in our sport, especially as we look at growing the game globally. Lacrosse, as big as we think it is in North America, right, there are only 1.2 million participants worldwide. And, the United States alone accounts for, give or take 900,000 of those, depending on how you put the NCAA and NFHS and US Lacrosse data together. So, it leaves us really small as a global sport. So we have to get sticks in people's hands and we've got to get them to stay. Get moving, right? That's a twist on physical literacy. Again, I think Rick had mentioned, whether you say physical literacy, physical fitness, whatever, but get people active, get them moving, and make that a part of the lacrosse experience. And this will make sense as I get in a little bit deeper. Obviously, putting players first. Any decisions at World Lacrosse really comes down to what is best for the athletes. We're the international federation. We hold the world championships. We have Olympic aspirations for our sport. Everything has to be about the athletes from the top down. Obviously, the idea of seriously fun, right? Again, lacrosse in North America, highly competitive. When we start talking about in Europe, right, it's beer leagues for the most part, right? People, they take their tents, they go to the tournament at the Berlin Open, they camp out alongside the field, they play a game, they drink a couple of beers and they barbecue, they do what they do, and it's more recreational. So we want it to be serious, to develop their confidence and competence and whatnot when it comes to the technical and tactical aspect. But we also need to make sure that the environment we're creating replicates the fun that has drawn them to the sport. And then obviously coaching the coaches. From there, and again, these are very rough. They need to actually go to our graphic designer. That's how new they are. We have a little bit of a participation pathway. And we know that participation pathways are not quite as linear as what maybe this shows, but we wanted to share this with our 66 member national governing bodies, right? Because a lot of times a country will start lacrosse and they start here. We just added a new country and they say, we can't wait to come to the 2021 Women's World Championship in Towson, Maryland. Well, you've only had lacrosse for 6 weeks. How are you going to start here? So we felt it was really important to provide a visual pathway, whether it's perfect or not, but to say, hey, to get to here, right, you need to build to this. And oftentimes what also happens is the national team level athletes from these other countries, once their playing days are over, they're gone because this doesn't exist in many countries, right? These bottom 3 levels, it's all focused here. So we built in what I'm calling the overtime component, becoming coaches, officials, administrators, right? All these things that are important to the global growth or the in-country growth of our sport. So we talk a little about the expected commitment level, and then what does their role look like throughout. And then the last piece here, and again, we've provided this out to our 66 member countries at this point, is just giving them an idea of what does this mean for each of the stages. And one thing I want to really highlight is, as you work in a global sport, and I think this may also come into play in some of those lifetime participation sports like golf, right? We felt it was really important to not tie ages to anything that we were doing, right? Lacrosse in many European countries or in Asian countries, they do not start participating until their university years. So it was going to be very difficult for us to gain any kind of adoption or traction if Discover stage said, 3 to 9 years old. We don't have lacrosse from 3 to 9 year olds. Our athletes don't come in until they're in university, right? So we ripped that piece out and focused more towards the years of experience and creating the right environment with the athlete development model based on that. And then some, highlighted items here. What does this mean for the athletes, right? What are they going to do with lacrosse? What are the coaches should be doing? Right? This framework that I've shared is what we're now using to drive the development of our coach development programming. We in January had launched what we're calling a bronze level curriculum that we are giving away to all of our member national governing bodies. Out of the 66 countries that we have, there are maybe 5 that actually have any kind of formalized coach training, which means we have 61 countries who, most likely if they're doing any coach training, they're bringing some North Americans into their country for a 3-day weekend. They're putting on a clinic for an hour or two and, each day, and that's all of the coach development they're getting. So we're actually giving this curriculum out to all of our member governing bodies and letting them take it, do what they need to do to tweak it and customize it to fit their needs, whether that's the lacrosse landscape or maybe even from a cultural perspective, what works for them, and sitting back and serving more in a mentoring type role with those members. So, we've had a couple of unique challenges along the way as we're developing this. The first of which was sport across the globe does not exist like it is in the United States or North America. So really we had to think about and forget simultaneously how sport is done here. And we needed to listen. And I think that's a valuable piece that, even the US based organizations that we can look at as we're trying to drive implementation of the models is, lacrosse in Wisconsin is different than lacrosse in Maryland. And to try to have a one size fits all model, right, without some flexibility in it for our various constituents is going to be very difficult to achieve implementation, right? I had already mentioned the starting age of the athletes, right? So yeah, really have to think about that because again, in North America, we think, oh, little kids Discover, but it's university age athletes in some of the Asian countries who are coming to lacrosse for the first time, right? And then, the other, I'd say, biggest piece is just the geography, right? With 66 countries in the entire globe, we have language barriers, we have cultural barriers, we have other communication barriers. If we talk about some of our membership on the continent of Africa, just getting access to these materials can be increasingly difficult. So, all things that we have to think about, at an international stage, but I also think to make this stick, whether it's coach development or athlete development, or when the two come together, items for us to consider in how we're going to drive that implementation to Ted's point. So I think I've used up 6 minutes and probably a few extra there. So sorry for running over, but thank you. And, questions through the chat, or I'm sure Sam will share emails at the end or whatever. So thank you.
Thanks, TJ. And yeah, as TJ mentioned, as questions come up or comments, please use the chat function for that, and then we'll address them shortly. And we're going to, you don't have to buy beer for the panelists since you did go over. So that's the punishment for that. So we're going to go to Mike Kreuger at USA Football to talk about how they have coordinated their ADM with their coaching education.
Well, Sam, thanks so much. And on behalf of USA Football, thanks for giving us the opportunity to share, and Kristen to the USCCE for this opportunity. it might feel like a continuation of TJ's here, and since TJ went a little bit, or I'll just continue going, TJ, because you brought up some really great points that segue into what we're going to share here a little bit. And I know the challenge is what TJ mentioned was really important, was that in what order do you develop your coaching education and your development model? For a lot of us, it might be going at the same time. For us at USA Football, we concentrated on making sure that the model was in place, that at least the groundwork, the framework of the development model was in place, and then structured our coach education to fit that model. And we felt that was a great approach for the reasons, and I'll tie back to something Rick said in his introduction, and that was a lot of our coaches right now are not even familiar with the acronym ADM or LTAD for that matter. So the education piece is the onus of responsibility is on us to share those concepts. So even if they don't understand the acronym or even the concepts or philosophy behind long-term athlete development, through coach education, subtly, even if we don't come out right and just talk and focus solely on the LTAD concept, what we do through our coach education gives them a foundation based in that philosophy. So we feel, and I'm sure many of you too, that aligning that was very important because that education piece was the crux of it, the most important piece to making sure that the model itself, the development model, was successful. As TJ mentioned also, we talked about core values and knowing what that is. That is one thing that was hugely important to us. So I would suggest that the first step as you try to align your coach education with your development model is to fully know and embrace what your core values are. For us, what we call our pillars. One of our pillars is coach education and training. We feel that the rest of the model is dependent on our coaches that are in the trenches, blowing that whistle when the kids come up and grab a knee every day. Those coaches, those men and women, knowing what the philosophy is and understanding at least at a foundational level is hugely important to the success of everything else we do. So knowing what you value, TJ put on there too, vision and purpose. Your vision, mission, purpose, the why of what you do in your philosophy needs to represent that in your education strategy. So another thing we focused on was to really try to close the gap between knowing and doing. And what I'm saying there is, what we're saying there is just giving your coaches the information is one piece, but helping them put it into application and implementation is hugely important. Knowledge is one thing, but actually doing it is another. So providing them that kind of foundation where they can go out and really bring it to life was important to us. And I'll hope when we share a structure of a model, you'll see that here in a minute. I think Ted had mentioned that knowing that difference and having that balance between technical content knowledge and coaching is hugely important when you're aligning these. Keep in mind that a developmental model is as much to do with philosophy and the philosophy of the way we do things as opposed to what we actually do. So I know one of the things we've been guilty of in the past and we're really working on is we use the education format and that touch point to share content knowledge, to say, here's what you coach. Here's the, here's how you pass a ball. Here's how you catch a ball. Here's how you run. There is a certain element of that you do need to share, but I would challenge your thinking and say that how and why you coach is more important than what you coach when we're talking about education and coach experience. Coaching itself is something different than knowledge of sport. Knowing the sport is one thing, coaching that sport is tied closer to teaching and instructing and building relationship. So if our education program doesn't necessarily, if it's focused on the what to coach, we're going to miss that philosophy piece and make sure that we are really forming and building coaches as teachers of the sport. Lastly, we look at our model as a full range leadership model, and that was very important to us. I want to make sure we get to the framework piece, but one of the things I would challenge you with, as you start to work and you think about the intersection, you think about where does coach education align with and where does it intersect with our development model, we really feel and would suggest that needs to be based, when you are building your education model, that it needs to be based on learning objectives for your coaches. So asking questions like, through our education model, through our education process, we can answer the question, what every coach will be able to do what? Every coach can do this. What does every coach need to know and value as part of our education strategy? And most importantly, and I haven't passed, but we really need to challenge ourselves to ask, what does a successful coach look like? And everything we do in our education model needs to support that exact learning objective. What does a successful coach look like? So what USA Football has done, what we did, and this is a very elementary look at it, and I apologize, it doesn't have any of the fancy stuff around it, but it's pretty straightforward. What we did is took our development model and we created a model that represented what we were doing in ages and stages of development. So very quickly, on the left here on that box that says Trusted Coach, Coach 101, Health and Safety. Regardless of the age or developmental stage of the child you coach, every coach takes this foundation courses. I want to point out the middle one, Coach 101. It's a program that we're very proud of. We built with partners from Inside Out Coaching. And what it is talking about, it's based on 4 questions. Why do you coach? Why do you coach the way that you coach? What's it like? What does it feel like to be coached by you? And how do you define success? And we developed a whole learning module around those 4 foundational questions. So again, really focusing in on the why you coach aspects, not just what you coach. Once coaches get through those foundational courses, they flow into our model of stage-based learning. And again, in alignment with our FDM, what we did, and this was a challenge for us because we weren't sure whether to keep things in age bands, because sometimes, as TJ mentioned, you get people or participants that are a little bit older but are just starting in the game. For us, it was to create a foundation of what to expect from this developmental stage of athlete at this age. And keeping in mind that a 10-year-old could easily be at a 5-year-old level in terms of their skill development. So we identified 5 modules, and this is what I'd like to focus in on. And if you'll see in the yellow box, for each coach at their age level, we provide an overview of that age level. We talk about the physical expectations and the athlete load, what they can expect physically from a 5, 6, 7-year-old or a 8, 9-year-old or a 10, 11, 12-year-old. We then have a module that focuses on the cognitive, social, and emotional development of that athlete. We feel it's hugely important, as one of our pillars is whole child and multi-sport development through multi-activity experience. So we talk, though, not just about the physical and technical responsibility we have to teach our athletes, but to also embrace the platform and help them grow from a cognitive, social, emotional aspect. The reason I think that's important, and it also ties to the other modules, is we know that coaching a young athlete at 6 and 7 years old is way different than coaching a 12, 13, 14-year-old. But we want our coaches to know what to expect developmentally from that stage of development so that they can meet them there. So we set it up that way. And then, of course, our sport throws in a little wrinkle in terms of we have contact versions of our game. So we have non-contact versions of our game. We have limited contact versions of our game, and we have a full contact version. Obviously, with the what there is tied to safety. So we do, if you coach a limited or contact version of our sport, we do provide additional training in the different levels of contact, how to teach appropriate and safer techniques and such. So that's kind of how our model is set up. And we worked very hard to align it to our development model. So we were supporting that inherent and underlying learning. So even if a coach doesn't or isn't familiar with long-term athlete development, we are educating them through our coach education model so that they know when they hit the field that they can support that overall philosophy. So thanks for letting us share. I know we're tight on time. So Sam, I want to kick it back to you.
Good job, Mike. Thank you very much. And I think you do have a unique challenge there with football for sure. Joe, throwing it to you to give us a summary and to bring us home, and then we'll go into a Q&A, and there's some pretty good discussion in the chat right now that we'll come back and talk to you guys about. So Joe, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do a little cleanup here after the presentations. Just real briefly for folks who aren't familiar with my background, longtime academic in the field of pediatric exercise science, also former director of high performance and coach education at USA Football prior to Mike taking on that position. And now I'm a visiting professor at Leeds Beckett. I work with a really outstanding adolescent research group and also their coaching science group there. And then doing some work with my great colleague, Rick Howard, who opened up the show today, and Tony Moreno, who you'll hear from tomorrow. at the National Strength and Conditioning Association, all focusing efforts on long-term athletic development. And basically my entire career and really my lifestyle has been dedicated to developing healthy, robust youth in the context of physical activity, fitness, and sport. And if you've heard me talk before, I'm going to bore you because I'm going to show the same old slides because I feel like I need to keep showing the same old slides as well. Because really we're at this stage where, you know, everybody here talked about education, and education, it's essential, no doubt. And there's probably some academics on this call as well. And you know, we talk about research, but we do need to keep with knowledge. Knowledge is power, but I'm at the point in time in my career, and I think as a field and as a space of long-term athletic development and coach education, we're to the point where knowledge isn't power until it's applied. So again, this slide right here kind of summarizes that we have these white papers, we have all your pretty websites and brochures on the ADM, so on and so forth. You all are putting together great educational materials, but this is a rubber meets the road and a boots on the ground problem. This is about implementation. This is the process of putting these plans and models in place. One thing, it's been addressed a little bit, but maybe I want to clarify as well, because I think we have two camps almost. You know, Rick opened and he kind of talked about the National Strength and Conditioning Association and the position statement on long-term athletic development. And here on the bottom here, we have our, what we call youth physical development model that was created by John Oliver and Rodri Lloyd from Cardiff Met in Wales. And it really focuses on the physical qualities. So fundamental movement skills, but also sport specific skills, and then mobility, agility, speed, these things that all these meatheads, these strength and conditioning coaches are really interested in, right? They're interested in building that engine. And then on the top, I think a lot of times coaches and the NGBs, the hats that they wear are more along the lines of game modification, rule modification, adding those constraints so that we get good technical and tactical development of these youngsters. And what we really need to do is think of it holistically. And again, that's been brought up a few times already. And it's great that NGBs are thinking this in this space. And, you know, it's the way that I've always thought about long-term athletic development, where it's athlete-centered and you're coaching the four domains of sport performance: technical, tactical, physical, and mental. And Rick did a great job about talking about social justice, you know, given the events of today. And we have that ring around it as well with character development as well, to make sure that we develop the whole child, the whole person as we go through this. And I've always thought about this no different than school. So as we put together our long-term athletic development models and our coach development models, it's athlete-centered or student-centered, and it's coach or teacher-driven. And the two cannot be separated. So we need to think about, instead of math and English and science and history or whatever, we have our main subject areas of technical, tactical, physical, and mental and character development up on our bookshelf here. And we're thinking about all of the units and lessons within each of those areas, and then how we lay those out, K through 12, if you will, or, you know, U8 through national team or what have you, and how those are getting displayed across the spectrum. This is a slide I think that Kristen wanted me to show. I did a workshop, Tony, Rick, and I did a workshop for West Virginia coaches, and I like to show this one here because it deals with this idea of alignment as well. And, you know, the NGB folks are in a top-down position, and they're sitting within the NGBs, and I have separate NGBs here. And I put a question in the chat box, like, when are we going to have the NGBs align themselves with coaching 101? That's sport agnostic, because it doesn't matter if I'm coaching lacrosse or football or golf, right? Coaching 101 is coaching 101, and everybody on this call who's a, you know, coach developer, they understand what I'm talking about, right? Motivating athletes is motivating athletes. It doesn't matter if you're a golfer or a football player. You know, teaching fundamental movement skills, it doesn't matter if I'm a golfer or a lacrosse player or swimmer or whatever. So there's that aspect of, well, and even getting alignment within those organizations. And then all these red marks here are barriers. So what's getting transmitted to state associations, and then here's where things are happening. And this is where I love spending my time, and no offense to anybody on this call, but I would rather you all be my neighbor who coaches club lacrosse, because it's these individuals, and you all know it, right, that need to hear these messages, and we have to get these messages out. And I thought one thing that Ted said was brilliant about the marketing piece of it, right? And Mike, you alluded to it as well about people, they don't know what ADM is. They don't know what LTAD is. So we have to come up with these strategies to engage communities and people who are boots on the ground. And we need to get these individuals and communities to align as well. Physical education is a great opportunity for all of the NGBs. And I know that you're aware of that, as is community rec. And so we need to remove these barriers so that we have system alignment as well. And then we get down to that individual team, and we even have barriers there, like strength and conditioning coaches, not on the same page as a coach, and parents not on the same page as anybody either, right? So again, it always has to be focused right here. So my last couple of slides here, and then we really want to hear what everybody has to say about how can we really make this happen in terms of coach and athlete development and system alignment and integration. Another slide that Kristen asked me to show is this one about alignment. So to me, this is true long-term athletic development, because I talk to a lot of high school coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, and they think they have a long-term athletic development program. Actually, they'd be sitting right here, right? Because they're not even a sport. They're just doing the physical quality development of these youngsters, grades 9 through 12. But if we go to a sport, right, if it's baseball, how does that look all the way down the pathway within your community? And obviously in some communities, that's going to be way easier than others, given the size and the number of clubs and schools and sports as well. But then how are we cross-talking with these other sports as we go from year to year? And I'm just going to finish with this one because I think this one is so vital. And this is really about people. This is about getting all of the stakeholders in the room and making sure that we all are on the same page. It's using those strategies of human behavior and using really effective communication skills to talk to parents and other coaches within your community and within your organization, so that we can really make this happen. We have enough research, we have enough educational materials, we're all doing a lot of good stuff, but we just need to figure out better ways for implementation, boots on the ground. And I think the last part of that is also the accountability factor. And they're not on the panel today, but I think everybody in the room also understands the efforts by USA Hockey. And I think one reason why it works really well with USA Hockey is because they have their boots on the ground foot soldiers in regional markets who go out and service the rinks and the coaches. And they do a fantastic job with that. Obviously resources become an issue as well, but collectively this comes down to maybe a USOPC aspect as well, because there's a lot of those sport agnostic things that can be taught and laid out, and we can help communities and community leaders and stakeholders with the implementation of those fundamental coaching and fundamental athletic development principles.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. So I'm going through the chat here and try to make heads or tails and pull out some questions here, but I'm gonna throw one to the panelist here. Actually, I'm gonna add a question of my own here at the start because it's inspired by one of the questions here, and I think it's really important. What are we doing to really get our coaches that are going through our certification programs to buy into the idea of sports sampling? Because someone asked about how do we get coaches to convince parents of that. I think there are a lot of coaches out there, first and foremost, who may need to be convinced about sports sampling when their livelihood is based on keeping that kid's revenue coming in year round in many sports. So wanted to toss that out to folks in terms of getting coaches, and then maybe the piggyback question is, then how do we get them to convince the parents that sports sampling is really a good thing to do.
Sam, I'd take a shot at that one. I think I agree. And one of the things we talked about earlier was just that aligning everything we talk about to the philosophy. If we have a philosophy in our education program that's tied to multi-sport development through multi-sport activity, then we should somehow be sharing and inferring that through what we do through our education program. With that being said, so for us, what that looks like is our pathway for our development model is, and we share this with coaches, with parents, with league administrators, is human, then athlete, then football player. That is our success pathway in our football development model. It's to develop the human being first. So the whole child, developing everything, not just embracing the responsibility as coaches to teach those technical skills, but really embracing the whole child development. If we do that and focus on that, focus on developing the human, then focus on the athlete. And where that comes in at is, again, that's that balance between technical knowledge and making sure that we're developing good athletes. Using the conduit of football is important to us, but our focus, especially at those developing ages, up to 12 years old, 10 years old, is on athlete development, developing a holistic athlete, and making sure that we do that. We can use football as a conduit to do that to a certain extent, but our main goal is to develop that athlete first. If we just jump to developing the football player, we are not truly following a philosophy of whole child development and athletic development. We're never going to help that kid reach their potential as a football player if we don't develop the human and the athlete first. Now, our hope is, we hope they fall in love with in our football focus for the rest of their life. But they're, as they get older, we love that. But maybe they go and they play lacrosse. Maybe they go and play volleyball. Maybe they go and play baseball, soccer, swimming, whatever it is. We've developed a good athlete that's going to set them up for success in their life. But we can't just jump to developing the football player first, because we're never going to help them reach their potential that way. So we do that through multi-activity, multi-activity across the board. Multi-sport is a foundation to our whole model.
Sam, if I might piggyback off of Mike there, I think one of the other things in our coach development programming, clinics, whatever it is that your national governing body maybe delivers, take away the sport for some of it. This was something that US Lacrosse had done in part of their coach development clinics, was they took the stick out of the hands and started to really emphasize, these are athletic movements, to Mike's point, that this is about being an athlete when we're trying to learn how to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And it exposed them to, wow, when coaches were trying it with athletes, the feedback that was coming in was, my kids can't overhand throw a ball. No wonder their passing with a lacrosse stick stinks, right? So that reinforced the idea of, oh man, we need to focus on some of this other stuff, not just the lacrosse piece of it.
Very good, TJ. And Mike, I think one of the advantages of football is that traditionally has not been a year-round sport, and because of the nature of it, it just doesn't lend itself to it. I find some of the biggest advocates on big scales for multi-sport and for sports sampling are college football coaches. And you can do a quick search and find coaches talking about how they love those multi-sport athletes, whether it's Urban Meyer, Dabo Sweeney, anybody, and they talk about the benefits of that. And I think that's really powerful message. And yet they have, in other sports, I think that's a little more muddied.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Sam.
So then the follow-up question that inspired that question discussion is, how do we get the coaches to engage parents in understanding sports sampling and getting away from this idea of your kid better be, really good at 4 if they're going to get that college scholarship or make the Olympics or the pros?
I think, Sam, for training is great and we can educate them, but you've got to give them the actual tools as well. And I think that was maybe Joe's point of what do we have collectively as sports, and starting to share that with the parents. But I mean, we all know, we've all coached. If we're out there, we're just trying to manage the kids at softball practice, never mind the parents. So I think the more that each sport can, you obviously want the training to provide the foundational knowledge for the coach, but the more tools and resources you give to that coach to give to those parents, because no parent wants to do the wrong thing for their child. They just don't know. So how are we telling that story? And again, to Joe's point, we probably could do a better collective job of it.
And TJ, I want to thank you for throwing in the USOC, the 5 ways that parent engagement work that many of us on this call worked on to develop those. And those are available. They're quick. They're really neat looking. Thanks to USOC for doing a really good job on making them look, very appealing and very easy to work with. And those are available for anyone to send out to anybody and to use them in the clubs and share them as needed. Scrolling through, trying to look at other questions here.
Hey, Sam.
Yep, go ahead, TJ, while I scroll.
I think the other thing, right, is how do we get them to, the parent side to go with the multi-sport or multi-activity participation? I like to think about it like we have a Walmart versus Target marketing battle going on, right? Neither one is necessarily good or bad. They're just 2 different businesses, right? And we have, the NGB side of sport who is interested in participation numbers and, all of those things. Then we have the for-profit side enterprise of sport, the event operators who are just trying to make their mortgage bills, right? And you may have coaches who are wrapped up into that, who are trying to, do the same thing. They're trying to make a living through their sport. They have to have year-round participation to put food on the table, pay their kids' college tuition, right? And it's a marketing battle. You've got this group saying this, you've got guests saying this, and ultimately either those 2 are going to need to come together to do what's best for sport, or one is going to have to outmarket the other. And, as sport nonprofits, I look at USA Football, your PowerPoint slides, they are beautifully designed in marketing. Golf, the video that you guys did is tremendous. USTA, I was watching the US Open last summer, and they have their, the youth tennis, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name, but the kids are on the court during the trophy ceremony promoting their ADM brand of USTA, right? They're winning the marketing battle, right, on the public stage, whereas maybe some of the more minor or lesser funded sports are not winning that marketing battle. And I think that's something we need to look at as we're trying to do this.
TJ, who do you mean by we?
We as in sport providers, who are towards the participation side. If we really want to drive that multi-activity or whatever the case might be, right, we need to get better at marketing what we're doing.
Yeah, and obviously we all know the elephant in the room is, again, it's always said on these calls, we don't have a ministry of sport. So then it falls upon the USOPC, right? Like I've seen the same thing, like during the World Series, USA Baseball will have some things about pitch smart, or USA Basketball, did some stuff in the past, March Madness. Why can't they be, again, sport agnostic? USOPC messages about long-term athletic development wrapped in a nice, user-friendly video commercial.
Certainly could, Joe. Certainly could.
Okay, we're going to throw this into breakout rooms, and the question there is to discuss, and we won't be listening in, so this is just a suggestion, is bringing this back to what we as coach developers and coach educators can do, or as organizations can do. What's incumbent upon us in this area, and what should we be doing? Not what do we want others to do, because I think that's a little bit out of our domain of control. So I think Kristen has the breakout rooms queued up, and so she is going to now send us off into our own little world using Harry Potter type magic for 10 minutes, she says. All right, I think everybody is back, it looks like. Hopefully you had some good discussions in your breakout rooms. And just as a quick wrap up, want to talk about this, looking at improving our systems. The whole idea behind this virtual summit is, to lead to better coaching and better athlete outcomes and experiences. So I want to thank you for participating. And just to let everybody know, we are coming up on time here, and want to say that we will reconvene back here at 10:30 Mountain Time, 12:30 wrong time. That's the Eastern time. So I'm trying to get everyone convinced that Mountain Time is actually the best time. So with that, unless Kristen has anything she needs to add for it, we will reconvene back at 12:30. I want to thank our panelists as well. Sorry, I should have done that a minute ago. So thanks to Rick and Joe and TJ and Ted for their contributions to the summit.
Thank you, Sam and Kristen and everybody. This was a great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Yep.
Thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. And thank you, Sam, for leading that session. Really great information and right on the mark of bringing the conversation around to what can we do as coach educators and coach developers, with a big focus on thinking about tomorrow when we get to our 11 and our 12:30 sessions to try to continue and expand this particular theme. But for right now, as Sam said, we're heading into break. So you guys know the drill. Get up and get moving. We have 15 minutes to do laps around your office or go outside and see the sunshine. And for the presenters in the next session, I'll get you guys organized in just a second. Give me about 5 minutes. So thank you, everyone.